What I love about the Vietnamese cuisine is that there are so many different types of noodle soups, and one of my favorites is bún riêu, which is a tomato-based soup with crab and shrimp cakes. To make the broth, I like to use pork neck bones or any type of pork bones, and I love eating my bún riêu with spare ribs. So I'm going to parboil them, and after parboiling the bones, you need to rinse off all the impurities. That way your broth is super clean and clear. Half your onions, leaving the bottom intact, and then do the same with the shallots. I use annatto oil, which is basically oil infused with annatto seeds. If you don't have annatto seeds, then you can do without and just use regular oil. Annatto oil is one of the things that will give the broth its signature red color. However, there are other ingredients in this recipe that will also contribute to the red color. Add your pork bones along with the pork spare ribs and add dried shrimp. Tamarind paste to give it a nice tartness, rock sugar, kosher salt, and mushroom powder. I use a 24-quart pot and then fill it all the way to the rim. Now to make your tomato mix, you're gonna quarter your tomatoes and chop your onions. Then chop your shallots along with your garlic. And then in a pan with annatto oil or regular oil, you're gonna saute your aromatics and cook them for a few minutes until your onions soften. And then I will pour a little bit of the oil from the crab paste and mix it all together. And this is one of the other ingredients that will give it a nice red color along with the tomato paste. Add shrimp paste and sprinkle salt and pepper on it. Once you start cooking the shrimp paste, it's gonna smell super pungent. Then add the quarter tomatoes. Prepare your crab cake mix by soaking the dried shrimp, then chop your fresh shrimp. I actually use the shrimp with the head on only because that's what I had, and that's why it has a red color to it. Add it to the ground pork. Add eggs to the mix, which will help bind the crab cakes together. Then add 3 tablespoons of the tomato mix that you made, along with a can of minced shrimp and a jar of crab paste. Grind your dried shrimp and add it to the mix. I like to use fresh crab meat and I squeeze out all of its juice. Add it to the mix and then gently fold the crab meat into the mix. Then refrigerate this while you are simmering your broth and occasionally skim the scum off the top of the broth. After an hour of simmering, you remove the pork spare ribs and add it to an ice cold water bath so the pork meat doesn't darken. Then after 3 hours of simmering, remove all of the bones from the broth along with everything else. Then strain the broth so it's super clear. Now add your tomato mix that you made. A lot of these ingredients you'll find at your local Asian supermarket, but if you don't have one, then you can certainly find them on Amazon. Add your quartered tomatoes. Now fry your tofu. Either buy tofu that's already fried or you can fry them yourselves. I like to use soft tofu just so that it soaks up all of the broth. And anytime I deep fry anything, I always like to have the oil at 380 degrees. Otherwise, if your oil isn't hot enough and you're frying things, it'll soak up too much of the oil. Cut the green onions into 1-inch pieces. Now cook your crab cakes by letting your broth boil. Once your broth boils, then you scoop the crab cakes into the mix. And once it starts floating, then you'll know that the crab cakes are cooked. And make sure to occasionally skim the scum. You will especially need to do that after you introduce the crab cakes to the broth. Now add your green onions to give the broth a nice, beautiful flavor. Then add your fried tofu. And what I did was with the spare ribs, I put them in the fridge so that it gets cold and it's easier for me to cut without it falling apart. And once I cut each rib, then I'll add them to the broth. And lastly, to finish the broth, I will add fish sauce. So you have these layers and layers of flavor. And to serve in a bowl of cooked vermicelli noodles, you add the broth along with all of its goodies, garnish with chopped green onions and cilantro and squeezed lime. I like to add perilla leaves to mine along with water spinach, and it's literally mouth-watering good. Enjoy.